recording?
It did not. Oh wait,
There we
now
are.
it just.
Now we are. Okay, cool. 1 second. So I'll just do a brief introduction of like you and then what we're seeking to do. Then we can jump on into the questions. If that sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, let me move around tabs. Cool. So hello, everybody. This is the first episode of the Community Makers Initiative. This is a special one with Rebecca Alcock, and she was a former Makerspace employee. The goal of the Community Makers Initiative is to engage in conversations with unique and creative individuals within the engineering community and hear their experiences and hopefully give other people, inspiration and encourage these conversations to go on so the culture can be more inclusive. So with that, the first question we have for you is just to tell a little bit about yourself, maybe your background, your interests, career endeavors, anything along those lines.
Sure. So yeah, I guess I'm from Decorah, Iowa, which is a small town in the northeast corner of the state. And right after high school, I came to UW-Madison for undergrad, and then I've been here since. So I did my BS in biomedical engineering, and then I did my MS in biomedical engineering as well. And then now I'm a first year PhD student in industrial and systems engineering. And I guess my interests are like school interests or?
Personal, school, anything, yeah.
Okay. I guess my academic interests are looking at the intersection of global health and engineering. So how can we use our technical skills to increase global health equity? And then personal interests, I mean, I love being on the lakes in Madison, ultimate frisbee, canoe camping, my dog. I just got a dog. She's like my #1 hobby right now. So
that's awesome. And then you've had at your time here, you've been pretty well involved in Engineers Without Borders, correct?
Yeah, definitely Engineers Without Borders.
Yeah. And, what were your major, projects you worked on that, or things that you might have taken away from that?
Yeah, so I joined the club Engineers Without Borders in the Guatemala group specifically when I was a freshman, and I got super involved right away, and I ended up traveling to some of the communities after just my first semester of school. So I got really involved, and then when we came back, we started, the design for some of our projects, and I got involved in the design, even though I was just learning everything and kind of dove right in. And then throughout undergrad, I kind of just progressed in the leadership roles in the organization and ended up being the project manager for 1.5 years of the Guatemala project. And that was for a big water project for the community of Zapote in Guatemala. And I think we ended up serving about 600 people, just over 100 families with a new water system. And that actually just wrapped up in September of 2020. So it was a long project and, many hours, but through Engineers Without Borders, that has definitely been the motivation for a lot of my work now in global health. Growing up in rural Iowa, I didn't have those experiences, and I didn't see the world in that way until joining that organization and being able to travel to those communities. So Engineers Without Borders has shaped, I guess, a lot of my education and a lot of my experiences since then.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so with that introduction, we'll kind of move on to now. If we can maybe hear about your identity and how that's affected, you think, your experience as an engineer, and if you maybe think your identity has affected your goals and how you approach reaching your career endeavors and things like that within the engineering community.
Yeah, so I do think it has shaped my experience as an engineer and just in the field of engineering in general. There have been many times where, I've been the only woman in the room, or I was even the only woman in an entire class once. So it was a whole semester of me just kind of being that voice. And when you're in those positions, it's super easy to doubt yourself and to experience imposter syndrome. So you wonder if your ideas are being held at equal value. You wonder if your voice is even being heard. And I think this creates additional challenges for anyone experiencing imposter syndrome, because you're already in engineering specifically, you're already taking like a taxing curriculum and doing, a lot of hard, mathematical work in your classes and in whatever you're doing. So when you're fighting a sense of inadequacy on top of that, you wonder, like, do I even deserve to be here? And so I think, I encourage, like, the more women we can get and the more people of color and the other minority groups that we can get to be represented in engineering, the better, because, the field will only benefit from being more diverse. So I don't even know if that answered your question.
No, totally. No, that was really good. No, I think that's good, and it's exactly what we're aiming to, achieve with the community makers thing. That's really
Okay.
with this type of idea. So going along that, so this is kind of a challenge that you faced, or maybe any other challenges you faced in internships, jobs, school in general. When these challenges come up, is there anything that you've done to like go head on at them or face them, or like anything like that?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start by saying that I don't think imposter syndrome like really ever goes away. Like, I think even the most self-aware and the most confident people, like, there's still this lingering feeling of, do I belong?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe one day, like, when we do achieve equal representation in STEM or in engineering specifically for women and people of color, like, maybe then it won't be as easy to kind of succumb to imposter syndrome. But like, there are things that I do to kind of combat some of these challenges and this lack of representation. And I think the most important thing you can do first is to find a community where you do have a sense of belonging. And for me, that was really Engineers Without Borders, and then in grad school, the Makerspace. So like, it was through those communities that, I found people with similar interests. I found people going through the same things as me. Engineers Without Borders actually has a lot of women engineering students who are involved. So I was able to find that sense of belonging in those groups. And then once you get it there, it kind of pervades to the rest of your engineering experience. Like, you've got that home base kind of. So it helps propel you through the rest of it and the other hard times, and you can kind of lean on those people when you need to. So I would say one is to find that sense of belonging, and then two is to do what you can to encourage other women or young girls to come up and try engineering, or make this space more friendly and more accessible to those groups. So in my case, what I try to do is, I know that, like, global health, for example, that's my interest. I know a lot of women are interested in the global health, or in the application of engineering to global health. And so, I created a student organization to help bring that community together. I, with the help of Lennon and the Makerspace, led that 170 group where, our first year engineers were getting to do projects with clients in rural Kenya, for example. So, and in that group, you have to apply as like a high schooler to be in, it's called a first year interest group. And so through creating that group, we had like 13 out of my 17 students were women in engineering. So it's just like, it's creating these spaces. So even though we're still going through it, it's like, now that you're in it, what can you do to make the space more enticing and more welcoming to those that follow?
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice to give. It's like serves as kind of like an inspirational thing for, the freshmen that come in. I think that's something really important that like the makerspace seeks to foster and like the 170 classes. So definitely to find your space, find the people you're close with, and go from there. And do you want to shamelessly plug the club that you made?
Um, so it's called the Global Health Innovation Club, and it was kind of something that I felt was missing in the College of Engineering campus. Was this, we have the amazing Global Health Institute on campus, but there was like the connection between the two for students, felt like it could be strengthened basically. So we just have like monthly seminars, or even more frequently than that this semester, but seminars highlighting researchers or practitioners who are doing innovation of any kind in global health. And then we also try to have some educational workshops. So we'll be having one actually this week, or not this week, I guess next week, on how to be inclusive with science communication and what just doing science communication in English means for, like Indigenous communities or whoever it may be. So trying to be inclusive with those things, and then also social events. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's
Yeah,
my plug for
and where could
DHS.
a student find information about your club to potentially join or attend one of these sessions? I imagine they're virtual.
Yeah, they are virtual. They can find us on the WinWhisk website, or they can follow us on Instagram. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And then the next thing we want to dive into is there anything that you've learned throughout your life? It could be through your personal life, through school, anything that's, helped you get through like a difficult patch. Obviously, going through your master's and now your PhD, I'm sure you have a bunch of very rough weeks with, with classes, your personal life, all that coming together and getting really overwhelming. So, has any experience specifically kind of helped you? Um,
Yeah, I would say it's just kind of like mindset that I try to maintain when, you know, it feels like everything's piling on you in one week. For example, if you have midterms and lots of homework and, stuff in your personal life going on, like whatever it is, like I always just try to remind myself, and not always with success, but like I try to always remind myself of two things. The first one is that, like, remembering that one thing doesn't define me. So like if it's my GPA, or if it's like the grade on a midterm or the grade in a class, like that one thing hardly defines you. Like it hardly even contributes to like who you are. Like you are actually, 1 million tiny things that make you who you are. So trying to remember that. And then the second thing is remembering like what the bigger picture is, putting things in perspective. So like if it is again, a hard week with midterms and classes, like what's the bigger picture here? Like I'm getting my PhD so that I can apply engineering to global health, so I can work on global health systems. And this one midterm and this one class isn't going to matter in the long run. Like all I try to do is just like maintain that mindset. And like I said, not always with success, but yeah, I attempt to do that.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice. I've heard similar advice before is you got to look big picture, and as long as your trajectory is going, towards your goal, it might go left, it might go right, but as long as you're going towards that goal, that's what matters. So that's really good advice, I think. We kind of addressed the advice that you give to someone, but do you think there's something or someone specifically that you always come back to that's kind of influenced your life? I know you talked about global health and Engineers Without Borders, but is there maybe someone or something besides that that's kind of guided you through everything?
Yeah, I would say that having mentors is like the biggest thing that you can do. I think that, like in my personal experience, Lennon has been an amazing mentor to me and really helped me when I first came to grad school. I wasn't even like sure 100% what I wanted to do. I didn't even know like what I'm doing now existed. And so Lennon like really helped me formulate what it is that I want, and he asked me like the tough questions like what do you want to actually do, and that kind of really was the launching pad for finding subsequent mentors that have continued to champion me. So like in my master's, for example, Dr. Kevin Alicieri at the Mortgage Fab Lab was another mentor in addition to Lennon that really believed in me and like was a champion. Like he really tried to set me up for success, and he did set me up for success, and he like wanted to make sure I attended conferences and networked with the right people. And he even helped with a trip to Kenya to do this 170 first year interest group that I mentioned. And then, my current PhD advisor, Dr. Justin Boudelier, he's been an amazing mentor. It's really about finding these like champions that you trust and that are really willing to, like first of all, your goals have to align, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but kind of on the same trajectory, and then working with them closely. And then it's interesting because like it can be hard to find a mentor, and I would say that like a personal mentor I didn't really find until I started graduate school. I've had lots of mentors throughout my
Mhm.
entire UW. Um, so another thing is like advocate for yourself so that you can find these mentors. Like they're not just gonna, it's not gonna happen out of nowhere. You have to advocate for yourself and network, and then also be willing to be a mentor to people who are younger than you. So
Exactly.
through like 170 and things like, you know, these first year engineering students might not be able to get, you know, a personal mentor who's a faculty member who's doing a lot of research and things quite yet. Um,
Hmm.
but I hoped that I was able to be a mentor to them in those kind of like formative years of their engineering career so that they could, you know, go find bigger and better things and new mentors afterwards.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think mentors are super important. I'm in the business school myself, so obviously
Yeah.
networking is what we talk about. And I know, like you mentioned, it can be kind of intimidating because you hear people have these mentors and they're like, oh, if it weren't for this mentor, I wouldn't have found this or that. So it can kind of be intimidating. Do you
Totally.
think there's like a good way to approach like finding a mentor? Because I know students might have a professor and like every word they say, they're like, I love it and like I really resonate with it. But how do you kind of take these like somewhat loose connections you might have in like a class or like a club with like a club sponsor and make that into something that's a little deeper?
That's a great point and question because I think that's so hard to
Yeah.
form a connection to a mentor. And I think it starts with getting really involved in one thing. Like this was some of the advice I gave my 170 students as like we were parting, like our last class. It's really easy and enticing to be a little bit involved in a lot of things, to like
Hmm.
not fully dive into something and just like attend, you know, a club meeting, which is great. Like if it's a seminar that you're interested in, that's awesome. But in order to form the types of relationships that you need to have a, you know, a productive mentorship,
Yeah.
you really need to dive into something. So like in EWB, for example, I dove in right away as a freshman. I got really involved with that one club and I wasn't involved in any other clubs. Like I
Yep.
know there's other amazing clubs that I wish I could have done in addition, but I didn't have the time to like fully dedicate to more than one thing. So
Hmm.
once you're in that one thing and you're like really working on it and you're diving deeper and deeper, you form stronger and stronger relationships with those professors or, you know, professionals. In the case of EWB, we've got local engineering professionals who are mentors and things like that that you become close with. But if you are just approaching somebody from, you know, sitting in their lecture in class, like there's a good chance they don't know who you are.
Hmm.
Um, so you really have to like, that's advice that I gave my freshmen, like I said, is like pick one thing outside of your classes,
Hmm.
and then like really dive into that one thing. And I think
Yeah.
that helps with like your resume and stuff in general too. Like the more you can really show your experience in one area, in one org, in one internship or co-op, whatever it is, I think the better off you'll be.
Yeah, and I think with that too comes like sort of like a vulnerability, like you mentioned with EWB, you kind of went in there and you're like, I was still learning the mathematical equations and this and that, but you kind of had to be willing to be vulnerable and go into these situations and express that you want to learn. So you can learn from your fellow students, from mentors. But I think a big part of it too is probably just being vulnerable and be willing to learn and be willing to make mistakes too.
That's a great point. Yeah. I think that being it's almost like I don't okay. It's almost like I was so naive as a freshman that I was like unafraid to try to be in a civil engineering org, even
Hmm.
though I was a BME student and um, you know, that's like not necessarily a natural fit.
Hmm.
But it's also just I was willing to put in like a lot of hours and a lot of time getting it wrong 100 times before ever even getting
Oh
close
yeah.
to getting it right. So I think that's a beautiful point. Like being vulnerable is so hard, but the payoff can be huge.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, thank you for that. And then next we'll get maybe something, it could be more personal, it could be work related, but something obviously you've been dealing with more or less for like a year now, the pandemic. So it's really easy in the pandemic to kind of just get caught into like a routine of like you wake up, you turn on your laptop, you sit at your screen all day, and then you're like, well, I would love to go do this or go in public. You're like, but it's probably not the best decision for, health reasons. So like, how have you been able to keep yourself like motivated working towards your goals, whether they're personal, professional, school related, and then like just continue growing into like the person that you've like strived to be?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying I don't always stay motivated. Like it can be really hard
Yeah.
to be motivated, and this goes without saying, but like we're obviously in unprecedented times.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I think first and foremost it's like important to just remind ourselves that we're not invincible, that we owe ourselves like grace and time off, and it's harder when you're at home to take time off and to separate your work life from your personal life. And that border can be really important, especially right now. So I don't always succeed at staying motivated, and I try to give myself time off too. And I
Mhm.
guess as a tactic is like taking time
Yeah.
to relax and kind of rejuvenate yourself. But I think some of the things that I am doing, first of all, like I tried to make my work from home space as like enticing as possible. Like I wanted it to feel cozy and comfortable. And like at the start of the pandemic, I was working on like a card table that had like a soft pad on top and like the wrong height, and like everything about it was so uncomfortable. But in my head, I was like, I'm going to be doing this for like 2 weeks and then I'll be back.
Nope.
But over the months, I've invested in things that make working from home a much better experience. Like I think the more you can set your environment up to like foster a healthy work life, the better you'll be. So like for example, I got like a standing converting desk that I
Oh,
can stand
nice.
up in, and yeah, that was like my big splurge for myself in 2020. And so that, yeah, I guess that's one thing. And then the second thing, to like keep pursuing my personal or professional goals, I think it's taking advantage of the virtual environment and of the virtual world. So like before the pandemic, we knew how small the world was, and like we've just seen it shrink since the pandemic started. Like, you can talk to anybody in a second anywhere in the world. And
Hmm.
so something that I'm doing is I was able to be connected with a Spanish teacher who lives in Bolivia, but we connect twice a week on Zoom. I keep practicing my Spanish. It's something I've like always wanted to do, and like I found the time, and since everything is virtual now, like it makes perfect sense to like call somebody from Bolivia and like practice my Spanish 2 hours a week.
Yeah.
Before I would be like, a Zoom call, like what? Like nobody does that. Like I need an
Right.
in-person instructor or something. So I think making your workspace cozy and then taking advantage of the virtual environment and how small the world has become.
Yeah, I totally agree about like how small the world's become because I've noticed too with like clubs and events like that, you might be like, well, I'm all the way at my apartment on this end of campus, and I'd have to get all the way there back to my apartment for my other meeting. But now, I mean, we have the ability to go into a bunch of different like meetings and like call up a friend on FaceTime on Zoom, and so
Yeah.
it's really easy to make connections with people. So I found like probably more than ever, like I feel more connected with people than I probably did even when I had face-to-face connections. So it's a really interesting like change, but it's kind of welcome to me, and I want to keep it up like post pandemic as well.
Same. Yeah. Like it's kind of like this paradox. Like we're not seeing anybody, but we're being more connected.
Yeah.
I think another like GHIC thing is that take advantage of like seminars and speakers right now, because if you're a student or faculty member, whoever, but like for GHIC, we're having somebody from Copenhagen like call in and give us a seminar. We're having some like people from California, like all over the place, which not would not have happened. We wouldn't have been able to hear from those people
Hmm.
before. So take advantage of those things if you're on campus.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And this next question, it could be a little bit more difficult. It's really big picture, so like
Okay.
don't get intimidated, just give it your best. But like when you look at your life, like what do you hope through all your work endeavors and everything you strive to be? Like, what do you hope will be kind of like the legacy you leave, whether it's on like the Madison community, like as a whole, the engineering community? Do you have a big picture? That's kind of it's very difficult, but
It's
give her a go.
yeah. Um, I think I have. I feel like okay. My best shot right now, like not knowing how my life will unfold.
Right, of course.
I think that like from the personal side, like I hope that my legacy is that like I made people feel good like when I met them or when I talked to them. Like I
Hmm.
just want people to like never leave a conversation with me or an interaction with me feeling, worse. I hope they feel better or
Yeah.
at minimum they feel the same.
Yeah.
So just like having good relationships with people, I guess is my personal one. And then from like a professional standpoint, I think like a lot of people envision like, and maybe this is just me projecting, but I feel like a lot of people envision like a very comfortable like retirement, like on a beach in Florida, like end of their life, super cool and casual. But that's like not really what I want. Like I want to I want my legacy to be that like I put it all out there and like that I put all of my time and resources and skills and everything out into the world and like I use those things to make the world a little bit more equitable, So I don't necessarily picture like the Florida retirement, but like I want my legacy to be that I really used all of the resources at my disposal to make the world a little bit better.
No, I think that's great too, and I think it's good to remember that you've kind of mentioned before. I think you said during your undergrad you weren't exactly sure, like you didn't even know the intersection of global health with engineering. So it's like really good to think like if you're kind of thinking on a question like this, like big picture, that like again like it's gonna you might stray like to the side, different directions, but as long as you're like progressing as a person and growing, like you said, and making like whether it's a small connection you made with someone on the street, at a bus stop, whatever, like that they're positive connections. That you're still just working towards like growth, I think is most important. So like I know you said these like goals, but who knows, they might change. We don't know.
Yeah,
Everything's always changing. Like pandemics happen. We never planned for this. And like we're obviously making it work throughout this. So I think that's
yeah.
great
Kind
advice.
of like that thing I was saying earlier, like it's not one thing that defines us, it's like the 1 million tiny things that make us who we are. And so like I feel like for the legacy question too, it's like I want those million tiny things to be as good as possible versus like setting myself up to just do one big thing.
Yeah. I think that's great. Yeah. And then with the last question we have, we've kind of touched on stuff like this, but maybe more a little bit more general with it. But like, do you have any advice that you'd give to like young creative adults, whether they're engineers, or anyone else that maybe would utilize the makerspace or be on campus? Just advice for them in school, pandemic life, whatever advice you care to share.
Yeah. I think I have two things that I think I will share, and these are things that I didn't learn in undergrad. Like these are things that I came to learn in grad school that I wish I had known. So, um, the first thing is to say yes to as many things as you can, um, while still like being able to dive into. So like with that example of like picking one thing and like getting really involved in it. Like I'm not saying don't do that and say yes to all of the student orgs, for example, if we're using that. It's like get involved in that one thing and then like do say yes to like all the opportunities that come your way in that one thing. So like if it's for a student org, like going on a field trip to some engineering firm, like say yes, go do that. If it's, I'm gonna apply to this scholarship, but my chances are not good, like yes, do it anyway. And then you'll have that content and you'll have, you usually have to reflect a lot on yourself when you're like writing a scholarship application about and your goals and what you want. So like, even if you try and say yes to a lot of things and they don't turn out and they or you fail, whatever it is, like there are still all of these gains you made in the pursuit of whatever that was. So saying yes to as many things as you can. And I guess in addition to that, this is actually advice one of my one of my mentors gives, and it's that you can't make a career mistake or a life mistake until you're like 35 or 40. Like, even if you hate your job, like, it's not a mistake. You found out that you hate that thing that you're doing. So, and that's valuable information, just as valuable as finding something you like doing. So, like, say yes to things that you aren't even sure about, you don't even know if you want to do or if you'll like it, because you can't make a mistake, especially in these formative years. And then the second thing is to slow down. And that's like something I really, really did not do until
That's a difficult one. That's a difficult
it's
one
so
for sure.
hard. Yeah. I did my undergrad like as fast as I could. I took so many classes every single semester, and that's what everybody's doing. Like, it's hard not to do that. You know, it costs money to go to school. Like, there's so many
The
reasons why.
pressures, like the
Yeah,
pressures from like the community. I noticed that in the business school too. You're thinking like everyone's getting jobs post grad, and I don't have mine yet. Or
yeah.
yeah, that's all these societal pressures come on you, and you just feel overwhelmed. And
Exactly. And it's so hard to like get out of that cycle or to see past it. I can like even picture myself as like an undergraduate student, and if somebody gave me that advice, I'd be like, what? No, like I wouldn't even take my own advice. Like, there's no way I would have like listened to this, but I wish I could stress the importance of it even more, because once you slow down and once you like, you have more time for your classes, you're going to learn more, you're going to appreciate more, and you also have time for all the things outside of engineering that make you who you are. Like, if you're just busy, 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 rushing through, these years of your life, you're going to miss the chances to make the memories that kind of go along with it. Like, it's just going to be, it's like this, you're just getting through it. And if you're just getting through it, like, that's not, to me, that doesn't seem like enough. And that's what I did. And like I said, I didn't figure it out until grad school, but now I take like way fewer credits than I ever did in undergrad. And I like really learn the material well because I want to learn the material. And fortunately in grad school, like, it's topics that you're interested in. That's why you're in grad school. Like, you're really honing in on the things you enjoy. But as much as you can, like, slow down, take the time to really learn, really appreciate all the opportunities. And once you're not a student anymore, like, you lose a lot of opportunities. Like, there are a lot of perks to being a student. You'll never be in a student org again. And like, think about all the cool things you get to do with your student org, or like the scholarships to study abroad or to take Spanish classes at the university. Like, all of those things come to an end. And
mhm.
so you really want to take advantage of those resources you have while you're there, and then be doing them like with enough bandwidth, like enough mental bandwidth to really appreciate them and get what you want out of them. So,
Yeah, I think that's great. Obviously, hindsight's always
I know.
2020. So it's like hard probably to look back, but it's like good that you've reached that, and like again that you can pass it on to people that you connect with, and
Yeah,
maybe through this even, you know what I mean? It's good to make an impact that way too. So
yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
yeah, then I don't know, do you have anything else you want to leave us with? Any more like shameless plugs to clubs, organizations, anything like that?
Oh gosh.
Off
No,
here.
I think I've done enough shameless plugs for the day.
Awesome. Cool. I'll just end the recording now for
Okay.
us. Stop recording.